Maya Chen had been counting down the days until auditions for 3 years. Every morning she would walk past the drama department's bulletin board and imagine her name printed beside Princess Cordelia in bold letters. The school's spring production of The Enchanted Kingdom was Westfield High's biggest theatrical event, and the lead role was everything Maya had dreamed of since she first stepped into the drama classroom as a freshman. She wasn't like the other theater kids who commanded attention the moment they entered a room. Maya was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of student who sat in the second row and took meticulous notes. But when she was on stage, something magical happened. Her reserved exterior melted away, revealing a depth of emotion and authenticity that had earned her small but memorable roles in previous productions. She'd played the wise servant in Romeo and Juliet, the narrator in Our Town, always supporting others' stories while nurturing her own dreams. The audition monologue had been living in Maya's heart for months. She'd chosen a piece from Shakespeare's The Tempest, Miranda's speech about seeing the brave new world. She'd practiced it in her bedroom mirror, in the school bathroom during lunch, even whispered it while walking to class. Her best friend Jamie, who ran lights for the drama department, had helped her rehearse countless times, always insisting she was perfect for the role. "You understand Cordelia's heart," Jamie would say. "You get that she's not just pretty, she's brave and kind and real." On audition day, Maya arrived early, her hands trembling slightly as she signed in. The auditorium buzzed with nervous energy as students practiced their pieces in corners and corridors. When Mrs. Pemberton called her name, Maya walked to center stage with quiet confidence. The stage lights felt warm on her face as she began Miranda's words, but she made them Cordelia's, made them her own. "Oh wonder, how many goodly creatures are there here, how beauteous mankind is. Oh brave new world, that has such people in it." Her voice carried through the auditorium with genuine wonder and hope. She felt the character's innocence and strength flowing through her, felt the connection between her own dreams and Cordelia's journey. For those 2 minutes, Maya wasn't the quiet girl from AP English, she was a princess discovering her own power. When she finished, the auditorium was silent. Maya looked toward the judges' table where Mrs. Pemberton sat with the assistant director and student president. She expected feedback, maybe direction for a callback. Instead, Mrs. Pemberton barely looked up from her clipboard. "Maya dear," she said, her voice carrying that patronizing tone teachers used when they thought they were being kind, "you're just not princess material. Perhaps you'd be better suited for background chorus. We always need reliable ensemble members." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Around her, other students shifted uncomfortably. She felt heat rising to her cheeks, her carefully constructed confidence crumbling in real time. Mrs. Pemberton was already calling the next name, Brittany Morrison, as if Maya had never existed. Maya somehow managed to nod and walk off stage without collapsing. In the hallway, she pressed her back against the cold brick wall and tried to breathe. "Not princess material." The phrase echoed in her head, each repetition making her feel smaller and more invisible. She watched through the auditorium's small window as Brittany took the stage. Brittany was everything Maya wasn't: tall, blonde, confident in the way that came from never being told no. Her audition was polished but hollow, hitting all the technical marks without any of the emotional depth that made theater transcendent. But Maya could already see Mrs. Pemberton leaning forward with interest, could see the approval in her nod. 2 hours later, the cast list went up. Brittany Morrison, Princess Cordelia. Maya Chen, Ensemble. Maya stared at the paper until the letters blurred together, feeling something fundamental shift inside her chest. It wasn't just disappointment, it was the dawning realization that talent might not be enough, that some doors might be closed before she even knocked. For 3 days Maya went through the motions of normal life, while the phrase "not princess material" echoed in her head like a broken record. She attended the first ensemble rehearsal, standing in the back row with the other overlooked students, watching Brittany stumble through scenes that Maya could perform in her sleep. She told herself to be grateful for any role, to learn from the experience, to try again next year. Then everything changed during lunch on Thursday. Maya had forgotten her script in the drama classroom and slipped back to retrieve it during the lunch period. The room was supposed to be empty, but she heard voices from Mrs. Pemberton's office. The door was slightly ajar, and Mrs. Pemberton was speaking to Miss Rodriguez, the guidance counselor. I know Maya Chen is talented, Mrs. Pemberton was saying, her voice carrying the casual tone of someone who didn't expect to be overheard. But we need to think about optics here. The spring play is our big fundraiser, and we have major donors coming. They expect a certain look for our leading lady. Maya froze in the doorway, her hand still reaching for her forgotten script. But surely talent should be the primary consideration. Miss Rodriguez's voice carried a note of concern. Mrs. Pemberton laughed, a sound that made Maya's stomach turn. Talent is important, of course, but it's not everything. Brittany Morrison's parents donated $15,000 to the drama department last year. Her mother is on the school board, and frankly she looks the part. That's what sells tickets and keeps the program funded. What about the Chen girl? I've heard wonderful things about her performances. Maya's sweet and she works hard, but she's just not leading lady material. Some people are born to be stars, and others are meant to support them. She'll be fine in ensemble. Maya's hands began to shake. She backed away from the door, her script forgotten, the conversation continuing behind her like a knife twisting in her chest. The auditions hadn't been real, the judgment on her talent had been a lie. Mrs. Pemberton had made her decision before Maya ever stepped on that stage, based on money and connections and some narrow definition of what a princess should look like. Walking home that afternoon, Maya felt a different kind of hurt than the disappointment of Sunday. This was deeper, more corrosive. She'd been naive to believe that merit mattered, that her years of dedication and growth meant something. The system she'd believed in, the teacher she'd respected, the institution that claimed to nurture young artists, it was all built on a foundation of bias and financial considerations. That night, Maya sat at her desk staring at a photo from last year's production, where she'd played a small but pivotal role. She remembered how alive she'd felt on stage, how right it had seemed. Now that feeling seemed foolish, childish. She thought about all the times Mrs. Pemberton had praised her work in class, all the encouragement that now felt hollow and manipulative. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was systemic. How many other talented students had been passed over for the right look or the right connections? How many dreams had been quietly crushed in favor of maintaining comfortable appearances? Maya closed her laptop and walked to her bedroom mirror. She looked at her reflection, her dark hair, her earnest eyes, her face that apparently didn't fit someone's narrow mold of what a princess should be. For the first time, she felt angry instead of ashamed. The problem wasn't her appearance or her talent. The problem was a system that valued image over artistry, money over merit. Something hardened in her chest as she stared at her reflection. She wasn't going to accept this quietly. She wasn't going to smile and be grateful for scraps while mediocrity was rewarded with starring roles. Mrs. Pemberton had taught her something valuable, though not what she'd intended. Sometimes the only way to change an unfair system was to refuse to play by its rules. Opening night of the Enchanted Kingdom arrived with all the nervous energy and excitement that Maya remembered from previous productions. The difference was that this time she felt like she was watching from the outside. During the first act, she stood in the wings with the other ensemble members, watching Brittany stumble through Cordelia's big emotional scene while the audience politely applauded. Maya's heart pounded as intermission approached. Jamie caught her eye from the lighting booth and gave her a subtle thumbs up. Marcus was positioned in the third row with his phone ready. Sarah stood near the back exit, prepared to intercept any interference. When the curtain fell for intermission, the audience filed out to the lobby for refreshments and socializing. Maya slipped away from the other performers and changed into her costume in the prop closet. Her hands were steady as she applied the final touches of makeup. She'd moved beyond nervousness into a state of focused calm. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya heard Mrs. Pemberton's voice over the intercom system, "please return to your seats. Act 2 will begin in 5 minutes. This was it. As the audience settled back into their seats, Jamie dimmed the house lights and brought up a single spotlight center stage. Maya stepped into the light and the auditorium fell silent. She began softly, her voice carrying clearly through the space, "What makes a princess?" For the next 20 minutes, Maya commanded that stage like she'd been born for it. Her performance wove together personal narrative, historical examples, and powerful poetry. She spoke about Queen Nzinga and Elizabeth I, about Malala Yousafzai and Rosa Parks. She talked about the strength it takes to stand up when everyone expects you to sit down, about the courage required to be authentic in a world that wants you to fit a mold. A princess, Maya said, her voice building to its crescendo, isn't defined by a crown or a castle or the approval of others. A princess is someone who sees injustice and refuses to accept it, someone who lifts others up instead of stepping on them, someone who knows that true royalty comes from the content of your character, not the color of your hair or the size of your parents' bank account. The auditorium was completely silent. Maya could see faces in the front rows, parents leaning forward, students with tears in their eyes, Mrs. Pemberton standing frozen in the wings with her mouth open. As Maya delivered her final lines about having the courage to write your own story, she could see phones throughout the audience. Marcus wasn't the only one recording. Dozens of people were capturing this moment, sharing it in real time. When Maya finished, the silence stretched for what felt like eternity. Then someone in the back row began to clap. The applause spread through the auditorium like wildfire until the entire audience was on their feet cheering. Maya stood in the spotlight, breathing hard, feeling more alive than she ever had. She'd done it. She'd found her voice and used it to say something that mattered. That's when Mrs. Pemberton stormed onto the stage. "This is completely inappropriate," she shouted into Maya's microphone, her face red with fury. "This young lady has disrupted our production with an unauthorized performance. This is not what we're here for tonight." The applause died away, replaced by confused murmuring. Maya stood her ground, still in her costume, still in her spotlight. "Get off this stage immediately." "Maya," Mrs. Pemberton hissed. "We'll discuss your punishment on Monday." But before Maya could respond, something unexpected happened. Students throughout the auditorium began to stand up. "Let her speak," called out a voice from the balcony. "She's right about everything," shouted another. "That was the best performance of the night," someone else added. Maya watched in amazement as students throughout the theater began voicing their support. She saw kids she barely knew standing up for her, expressing frustration with the school's treatment of talented students who didn't fit the expected mold. Mrs. Pemberton tried to regain control. "Everyone, please take your seats so we can continue with our scheduled programming." Actually, came a voice from the front row. "I'd like to hear more from this young lady." Maya's heart nearly stopped. The voice belonged to Dr. Patricia Williams, the superintendent of schools, who was attending as an honored guest. The auditorium buzzed with energy. Parents were talking among themselves, students were cheering, and social media notifications were pinging throughout the crowd as videos of Maya's performance spread online. Mrs. Pemberton looked around desperately, realizing that her attempt to shut Maya down had only amplified her message. The hashtag #RealPrincess was already trending on local social media, and the story was spreading far beyond the walls of Westfield High. Maya remained center stage, still in her spotlight, as the chaos swirled around her. She'd wanted to make a statement, but she hadn't anticipated this level of response. The performance was over, but the real drama was just beginning. The idea came to Maya during her least favorite class, AP Statistics. While Mrs. Goldman droned on about standard deviations, Maya found herself thinking about platforms and audiences. If the official channels were closed to her, she'd create her own. If she couldn't be Princess Cordelia, she'd show everyone what a real princess looked like. After school, she found Jamie in the lighting booth, adjusting gels for that afternoon's rehearsal. "I need your help with something," Maya said without preamble. Jamie looked up from the color wheel he was organizing. Finally ready to egg Pemberton's car. "Something better." Maya climbed into the booth and closed the door behind her. "I'm going to write and perform my own show." "Maya, hear me out." She pulled out her phone and showed Jamie a video she'd found online. "Remember that girl who did a flash mob proposal at her graduation? It went viral because it was unexpected and authentic. What if we did something like that, but with real artistry?" Jamie set down his tools and gave her his full attention. Maya had his interest now. Jamie lived for creative chaos. "I'm thinking opening night of Enchanted Kingdom. During intermission, when all the parents and donors are there, when everyone's feeling good about supporting the arts. I take the stage and perform a piece about what it really means to be a princess. Pemberton will lose her mind." "Good." Maya's voice was steadier than she felt. I've been thinking about this since Thursday. We always talk about theater being a mirror to society, about art challenging comfortable assumptions. Well, here's our chance. Over the next 2 weeks, Maya threw herself into the project with an intensity that surprised even her. She wrote during lunch, between classes, late into the night. The piece she created wasn't angry or bitter, it was something more powerful. It was truthful. The Real Princess became a 20-minute one-woman show that deconstructed fairy tale stereotypes while celebrating authentic strength. Maya researched historical queens and leaders, wove in poetry from diverse voices, and created a narrative that was both personal and universal. The princess in her story wasn't waiting to be rescued, she was fighting her own battles, lifting up others, and redefining what royalty meant. The costume was Maya's favorite part. She spent weekends at thrift stores and fabric shops, creating something that looked regal but wasn't traditional. Deep purples and silver flowing fabric that caught the light, a crown she made from twisted wire and costume jewelry. It was beautiful in an unconventional way, much like the message she wanted to convey. Jamie became her partner in rebellion, helping with technical aspects and serving as her sounding board. They recruited Marcus from the computer club to help with social media strategy and Sarah from student government who understood the political landscape of school administration. You realize this could backfire spectacularly, Sarah warned during one of their planning sessions in the library's back corner. Pemberton could have you suspended. Your college applications, I've thought about that, Maya said. But what's the alternative? I spend the rest of high school accepting that some fights aren't worth having. That talented people should quietly accept being overlooked because it's easier. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Jamie would handle lighting and sound from his booth. He had legitimate access during intermission to make technical adjustments. Marcus would live stream the performance and manage social media to ensure it reached beyond just the auditorium. Sarah would handle crowd management and serve as a buffer between Maya and any attempts to stop the performance. They scheduled 3 secret rehearsals in the old gymnasium after hours. Maya had convinced the night janitor, Mr. Hassan, to let them use the space by promising to help his daughter with college application essays. Each run-through made Maya more confident. The piece was good, really good. It was the kind of theater that could change minds and touch hearts. 2 days before opening night, Maya stood on the darkened gymnasium stage, running through her final rehearsal. Jamie watched from the bleachers, Marcus timed each segment on his phone, and Sarah took notes on pacing and audience engagement points. You know what the best part of this is? Jamie called out as Maya finished her final monologue. What? You're not trying to prove your princess material. You're proving that the whole concept of princess material is garbage. Maya smiled, feeling something she hadn't experienced since auditions, pure, uncomplicated joy about performing. Exactly. And by the time I'm done, everyone in that auditorium will understand the difference between playing a princess and being one. The night before the official opening, Maya lay in bed with her costume hanging on the closet door, her script memorized so thoroughly it had become part of her heartbeat. Tomorrow she would either make her point beautifully or crash and burn spectacularly. Either way, she wouldn't be invisible anymore. Margaret woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of her cell phone buzzing. Elena's name flashed on the screen and Margaret's heart immediately began racing. "They planted drugs in my car," Elena whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm at the police station. Stevens set me up." Margaret was dressed and out the door within minutes. She found Elena in an interview room at the county sheriff's office, Detective Kowalski looking grim as he reviewed a report. Anonymous tip called in Elena's license plate, Kowalski explained. Traffic stop found a bag of prescription pills in her glove compartment. Stevens is claiming she stole them from his wife's medical practice. That's impossible, Margaret said. Elena's been with me or at work every day this week. I know, Kowalski said quietly, but without proof that Stevens planted the evidence, the DA's office is concerned about Elena's credibility as a witness. Margaret felt the walls closing in. Stevens had played his final card brilliantly, discredit their key witness by framing her for the very crimes they were trying to expose. There has to be security footage, Margaret said. Parking lot cameras, traffic cameras, we're checking, Kowalski assured her. But Elena's arraignment is this morning. If she's formally charged, Santos might have to drop the investigation. Margaret left Elena with Patricia Hoffman and drove straight to the high school. It was still dark, but she knew Stevens often arrived early for morning workouts. Sure enough, his truck was in the faculty parking lot. She positioned herself across the street and waited, her phone ready to record whatever happened next. At 6 a.m., Stevens emerged from the building, talking animatedly on his cell phone. Margaret could only catch fragments, but she heard enough. Told you it would work, and Chen woman won't have any credibility now. She followed his truck at a distance as he drove to Harrison's house. The principal came out immediately as if he'd been waiting. Margaret parked behind a neighbor's hedge and crept closer, her phone camera recording. The girl's been arrested, Stevens said, his voice carrying in the still morning air. By tonight, this whole investigation falls apart. What about Dr. Stevens? Harrison asked nervously. She's still talking. Amanda won't testify without corroboration. Once Elena's credibility is destroyed, it's just my wife's word against mine. Who's going to believe a bitter ex-spouse over Riverside's favorite coach? Margaret's hands trembled as she recorded their conversation. They were confirming everything, the frame-up, the cover-up, their confidence that they'd successfully destroyed the investigation. Then Stevens said the words that made her blood freeze. We should have handled the Chen woman the same way we handled her son. Permanently. Harrison stepped back. Jesus, Eric, you can't be serious. Why not? Car accidents happen all the time, especially to unstable grieving mothers who've been acting erratically. Margaret had heard enough. She backed away carefully, her recorded evidence secure, and called Detective Kowalski immediately. I have Stevens confessing to Danny's murder and threatening to kill me, she whispered. And I have Harrison as a witness to both. Kowalski's voice was tight with excitement. Where are you? Harrison's house on Maple Street. But hurry, I think they're planning something. Margaret had barely ended the call when she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around to find Stevens approaching, his face dark with rage. Margaret Chen, he said, his voice deadly calm. You just can't leave well enough alone, can you? She held up her phone, praying the recording was still active. Stay away from me. You know, your son said almost the exact same thing that night on Highway 47. Stevens smiled, a cold expression that chilled Margaret to her bones. Right before I rammed his car off the road. Why? Margaret asked, backing toward the street. He was just a kid trying to do the right thing. He was a threat to everything I built, Stevens snarled. 20 years of coaching, of building champions, and your sanctimonious little brat was going to destroy it all over some pills. Do you have any idea how many kids I helped succeed? How many scholarships? How many lives I changed? By drugging them? By giving them what they needed to compete. You think these kids can handle the pressure of modern athletics clean, the academic demands, the physical requirements? Stevens stepped closer. I was helping them achieve their dreams. Margaret saw Harrison emerge from his house, clearly torn between fleeing and protecting his co-conspirator. Eric, stop, Harrison called out. This has gone too far. It went too far the night you convinced me to cover up the accident. Stevens shot back. Now we're in this together and we finish it together. Margaret heard sirens in the distance and felt a surge of hope. But Stevens heard them too, and his expression shifted from anger to desperate calculation. You're not walking away from this, he said, lunging toward Margaret. She ran, screaming as loudly as she could, Stevens' heavy footsteps pounding behind her. She reached the street just as 3 police cars rounded the corner, their sirens wailing. Stevens stopped short, his face cycling through emotions, rage, fear, and finally, resignation. Detective Kowalski was out of his car before it stopped moving, his weapon drawn. Eric Stevens, you're under arrest for the murder of Daniel Chen and the attempted murder of Margaret Chen. As they handcuffed Stevens, Margaret heard him laughing bitterly. You think this changes anything? I gave this town 3 state championships. Half these parents will still think I'm the hero and you're the villain. Principal Harrison stood frozen on his lawn as additional officers approached him. Richard Harrison, you're under arrest for accessory to murder and obstruction of justice. Margaret sank onto the curb, her legs finally giving out. Elena arrived with Patricia Hoffman just as the ambulance pulled up to check Margaret for injuries. "The charges against you are being dropped," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. Margaret's recording proves Stevens planted the drugs. As the sun rose over Riverside, Margaret watched them load Stevens and Harrison into separate police cars. In a few hours, the local news would break the story. The community would be forced to confront the truth about their beloved coach and respected principal. Some would accept it, others would continue to see Margaret as the woman who destroyed their heroes rather than the mother who sought justice for her murdered son. But for the first time since Danny's death, Margaret felt at peace. The truth was finally free, and her son's real legacy, his courage, his integrity, his willingness to protect others, would be remembered. Stevens had been wrong about one thing. This changed everything. 18 months later, Margaret stood before the courthouse steps as reporters documented the end of a legal saga that had captivated the state. Eric Stevens had been sentenced to 25 years for vehicular homicide and running a drug distribution network. Principal Harrison received 8 years for obstruction of justice and conspiracy, his education career permanently destroyed. The school district had paid settlements totaling $3.2 million to families affected by Stevens' drug operation, and Riverside High had undergone a complete administrative overhaul. 3 school board members had resigned in disgrace. But for Margaret, the legal victories mattered less than the personal transformation she'd witnessed in her community. Danny's story had become a rallying cry for student safety and institutional accountability. The narrative had shifted completely. Her son was now remembered as the courageous teenager who'd risked everything to protect his classmates. Elena emerged from the courthouse, her law degree finally in hand. She'd graduated summa cum laude and already had job offers from 3 firms specializing in institutional corruption cases. The Daniel Chen Foundation received its nonprofit status, Elena announced, waiving official paperwork. "We can start awarding scholarships next month." Margaret smiled, thinking of the applications they'd already received, students who'd reported unsafe conditions, challenged unfair policies, or stood up for vulnerable classmates despite potential consequences. Danny would have been proud of these young people who chose courage over comfort. "Patricia wants to know if you'll speak at the law school next week," Elena continued. About advocacy and perseverance in impossible cases. Margaret had become an unexpected public figure, consulting with families across the country who faced similar institutional cover-ups. Her guidance counselor background, combined with her hard-won experience navigating corruption and intimidation, made her uniquely qualified to help others fight for truth. The work gave her purpose beyond grief, transforming her pain into protection for other families. That evening, Margaret visited Danny's grave, carrying fresh flowers and a newspaper clipping about the scholarship recipients. The headstone had been replaced after Stevens' vandalism, now reading simply, "Daniel Chen, beloved son, courageous friend, forever our hero." She no longer felt the crushing weight of others' lies about her son. The community knew the truth now. Danny had died protecting others, not destroying them. As sunset painted the cemetery in golden light, Margaret felt Danny's presence strongly. Not the troubled teenager Stevens and Harrison had fabricated, but the real Danny, kind, brave, and principled to the end. "They finally know who you really were," she whispered, placing the flowers against his stone. "And they'll never forget." Walking back to her car, Margaret carried no bitterness toward those who'd believed the lies, or even those who'd perpetuated them. Her son's legacy was secure, his reputation restored, his sacrifice honored. Danny Chen had saved more lives in death than Stevens ever had in his coaching career. And Margaret had ensured that truth would outlive them all.